Today, we're going to look deeper into some of the most unique basketball players to ever play. These are the shortest players in NBA history. And first, we gotta start with the shortest player of all time, Muggsy Bogues, who stood at just 5'3". Bogues started off his basketball journey on a powerhouse high school squad that featured 4 future NBA players, including himself, at Dunbar High School in Baltimore, with a future college coach, Bob Wade, at the helm. In both the 81-82 and the 82-83 seasons, Dunbar would go undefeated and was named as the best team in the country, and to some, even today, the best of all time. But this success would not falter at the college level either, because Bogues went after record at Wake Forest University, where he still holds the school record for the most assists and the most steals that he broke during his time there. He made enough of an impact during the college time to get drafted 12th overall in the 1987 draft. Upon entering the league, Bogues would make headlines when he teamed up with 7'7" Manute Bol on the Washington Bullets, hence where this famous picture came from. But his tenure with the team would be short-lived, as an expansion draft came to the NBA just after his rookie season. Bogues would be picked up by the newly formed Charlotte Hornets during the expansion draft, and that is where he showed that he could make up for his lacking height with his playmaking with the ball and strangely hounding on-ball defense. As the Hornets grew, Bogues was a cornerstone and the glue that kept them together, and he was able to help the Hornets throughout their first 3 playoff appearances. In a game in the 1993-1994 season, Bogues would bring everything together, show why he was so important, when he would put together a career-high tying 24 points along with 10 assists to pack the stat line. In the 632 games with them, Bogues would boast averages of 8.8 points, 8.8 assists, and 1.7 steals per game. But after leaving them during the 1997-1998 season, Bogues would briefly play for the Warriors and Raptors before his time in the NBA was up. His size made him a fan-favorite player, but his bulldog energy and basketball IQ was what made him an actually viable option at the point guard position, as shown many times, like when he blocked Patrick Ewing or when he locked up Michael Jordan himself. But even though his defensive clips are the ones that have circulated the most, that was not even his best attribute. He had fundamentally sound facilitating and ball handling abilities, reaching up to 10.7 assists in a season, which I mean is great in any era, but given the inflation of stats with the pace of play today, he'd be putting up ridiculous assist numbers, all while keeping his turnovers under the 2 per game mark in all but 1 season. But most importantly, he never took a playoff. He had that dog in him. He knew that he had some physical limitations, but that did not stop him from becoming a nuisance on the floor. He was causing issues for players that had a height advantage of a foot on him, or maybe even 2, but he did not care one bit, and that is how he cemented his position in a league that does not normally feature players of this stature. When Bogues retired, he stayed in Charlotte, but after a couple of years working in the real estate business, he would get back into basketball to coach the Charlotte Sting, a WNBA team, in 2005, even with no prior coaching experience. He would coach the team until January of 2007, when the team unfortunately folded, and when it was all said and done, he'd achieved a bit of a disappointing coaching record at 14-30. After a couple more years, he would coach a high school basketball team, but after stepping down in 2014 from that position, he would be named as the Charlotte Hornets team ambassador and special projects advisor. Lastly, and most important to him, is the Muggsy Bogues Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization that seeks to help families struggling with food security, education, and other needs. You see, Bogues had a troubled childhood, so doing whatever he can do to give back to the community that did so much for him is more important than anything else. Bogues was certainly special, but next up we have a player that was just as exciting in Nate Robinson. Robinson's athletic journey was a little bit more complicated than your everyday player, because he was recruited out of high school on a football scholarship, even though he made statements on the basketball court as well by leading his high school to a state championship alongside former NBA player Terrence Williams. Although he was able to earn a starting spot on the Washington Huskies football team at cornerback, even snagging 2 interceptions, he quickly decided to focus on basketball after a breakout season on the floor. In his freshman season, he earned All Pac-10 freshman honors, scoring 13 a game. In the very next season, he was put on the All Pac-10 first team, averaging 13.2 a game. While Muggsy Bogues honed in on his playmaking and ball handling skills, Nate Robinson was more of a natural scorer, but he was just as fearless. He had a smooth jump shot and could jump high enough to get it over outstretched hands of his defenders. But after leading the Huskies to a Sweet 16 appearance during his junior season, he decided to pack it up and declare player for the 2005 NBA draft. Through his time at Washington, he had caught enough attraction to get drafted in the first round by the Phoenix Suns, who immediately traded him to the Knicks. But Robinson would make an immediate impact in New York, even getting a few starts in his first season. He would have a breakout performance at the Madison Square Garden against the Philadelphia 76ers, scoring 17 points, including a banging game-winning three-pointer in overtime. But his defining moment, of course, that season came when the NBA invited him to compete in the 2006 Slam Dunk Contest, and there he made headlines. The dude put on a show. Leaping over fellow dunk contest champ Spud Webb helped him edge out the victory and solidified him as a fan favorite throughout the league. In his rookie season, he averaged 9.3 points and clearly showed that there was a place for him in the league. The next season, Robinson would produce similar results, and he kept up his reputation as one of the league's most entertaining players. Still, coming off the bench, Robinson produced the spark that his team needed. However, later that season, he showed that he was not just the spark that this team needed off the bench, but that, even at his height, he was a bruiser. Down 19 points to the Denver Nuggets, Robinson's teammate Marty Collins committed a flagrant foul on a young J.R. Smith. Smith was reasonably upset, and when Robinson tried to push Smith away, things escalated. Robinson and Smith would start shoving and would eventually end up throwing each other into the crowd. Moments like this further prove that Robinson, despite his size, was scared of nobody. Although he would never be a part of a Knicks playoff team, he was one of the building blocks that helped them get there. That is, until he was traded to the Boston Celtics. He had also given them career highs the year before, averaging 17 points per game and coming in third place in 6th Man of the Year voting. Now, Robinson was a fan favorite in Boston due to the excitement he brought, but jumping ship to a much more talented team on the defending champs meant that Robinson would see a steep statistical decline. Robinson was such a fun, exciting, and talented guard, but at 5'9" with a streaky jump shot and spotty defense, his impact on a team that was contending for titles was a bit questionable. Although the Celtics loved having Robinson around, they would trade him in the middle of the very next season to the Thunder, who really didn't have a place for him. After only appearing in 4 games for the Thunder, he would be released, and people wondered if that would be it for the dynamic guard after a steep decline, creating the image that there was no life left in this game. Nate would get another chance signing with the Warriors the very next year, and boy did he make the most of it. Without Steph Curry for a little while, the Warriors needed a replacement, and Robinson would fill the void immediately, leading the Warriors to an overtime victory over the Miami Heat with a 24-point performance. His former self was coming out of the shadows, and he gave them stability in a time of growth, yet still, he would move on to join the Chicago Bulls next season, and by then, he was seen as a journeyman, just jumping from contract to contract while still on his last legs. But still, he was making a difference and produced some of the most iconic performances, extending his career past what was supposed to be the end of it. Derrick Rose was injured after his horrific playoff injury, and the Bulls needed somebody to step up, and Nate was that guy. Like in the playoffs of that year, when he was able to put together a 34-point performance in a triple OT game to give the Bulls a 3-1 series lead against the Knicks. Attacking the rim and finishing through contact, Robinson upheld his fan favorite image and kept the Chicago Bulls near the top of the league in lieu of Derrick Rose. Nate Robinson seemed to be the act that would never go away, and the fans couldn't get enough of it, resurging his career to an extremely loud 13 points per game, then a crazy 16 a game in the playoffs. I mean, for putting up 6 a game just a couple years ago, and 3 a game with the Thunder, whenever given the chance, Nate Robinson time and time again proved to be one of the most energizing players in the NBA. But like with the Warriors, Robinson would leave the Bulls after just 1 season, to where his NBA career was all but over. He had defined his 11-year NBA career with his explosive first step and his aggressive tendencies. Time and time again, he proved that he was scared of nobody, and the energy he brought were why teams were interested in him in the first place. He was more than capable of scoring and heating up quickly to take over games and get the fans into it as well. Nate attempted to extend his basketball career as long as possible through overseas ventures and a year in the G League. Now, Robinson's career was pretty average statistically, but in terms of giving fans something to remember, Nate Robinson was one of the biggest icons of the decade. After his playing days, he played a role in the movie Uncle Drew alongside plenty of other NBA players. He even went up against Jake Paul in his earlier days as a boxer, where he took a nap on the mat where he still lays to this day. On a more serious note, Nate Robinson's been suffering from kidney issues that certainly are no small issue or anything to joke about. So all we can do now is wish the best for him and be thankful that he gave us some of the most memorable basketball of the decade. But now, let's take a deeper look into the player that Nate Robinson jumped over in his infamous infamous dunk contest performance, Spud Webb. Webb was overlooked due to his height even more than Robinson and Bogues ever had been. He didn't get a chance to play varsity basketball until his senior season, but when he was given that chance, he scored 26 points per game. Despite his performance, college scouts paid little attention to the undersized guard for obvious reasons. He would go on to play for Midland College, a JUCO program with a junior college national title, and finish his college career out at NC State. Averaging 10 points and 6 assists per game, Webb made a difference, and so the Detroit Pistons decided to pick him in the 4th round of the 1985 NBA draft. Even now, players that get drafted end up getting released a lot of the time, and so with the larger draft class, there was a lot of competition, and the guard-loaded Piston team didn't see a need for Webb, so they released him. But the young guard was not going to go out without a fight, so he tried out for the Atlanta Hawks, beating out seasoned guards for a spot on their squad. He was unique. The fact that he could dunk with a 42-inch vertical standing at just 5'6" was absolutely wild. But that was not the only thing he brought to the table. Really, it was all about his speed on the floor that made him so effective, as he placed all the attributes you could put in height in his athletic ability. Just as Nate Robinson had done, Spud Webb shocked the world at the 1986 Slam Dunk Contest, even beating out his own teammate in Dominique Wilkins in his hometown of Dallas, Texas. His performance was so different, it just doesn't even look right. And like many other shorter players, he became a fan favorite. Fans came to see the smallest guy on the court leap higher than anyone would have thought, and he quickly worked his way into a key role with the Atlanta Hawks. He provided a spark off the bench and even got himself a few starts, staying rather efficient in orchestrating the offense. Although his time with the Hawks would produce highlights for the speedy guard, he would be traded to the Kings prior to the 1991-1992 season. He would start his Kings career with a 27-point performance and put up an impressive performance against the Hakeem Olajuwon-led Rockets not too long after. He was becoming rather well-rounded. He attacked the rim with confidence. Although he was not known for his shooting, he could knock down shots when needed, and of course, when all attention was on him, he could dump it down to a teammate and help them get a bucket. He was a key component to the Kings for 4 years, and while his production declined year by year, and he was more well known for his time with the Atlanta Hawks, Sacramento was actually the peak of his career, putting up a well above average 16 points per game. However, prior to the 95-96 season, Webb would be traded back to Atlanta for a second stint with the team. Although he purely played a bench role with the team, fans welcomed him back with open arms. At this point, the run was basically over, and after the 97-98 season, Webb retired, but he left a legend. He was a trailblazer for shorter players to make a name for themselves in the league alongside Muggsy, who came a few years after him. His bounce paired with his height defied prior conceptions, and he made it a statement. But the bounce was just a bonus. He kept his grip on the league due to his ability to disrupt passing lanes, outrun defenders, and challenge shot blockers. His confidence challenging 7-footers at the basket showed that he could overcome his physical restrictions. And after his time in the NBA, Webb continued to impact the league. He would go on to coach Nate Robinson and help him win the dunk contest, of course, and to no one's surprise, would go on to become a dunk contest judge for the years to come. Lastly, he also continues to serve his community in Dallas to help give back for what he was given as fuel for his legendary career. But now let's focus on another recent player, former Boston Celtics guard Isaiah Thomas. After growing up in Washington, Thomas decided he wanted to stay within the state, and so he committed to play at the University of Washington, where he received Nate Robinson's blessing to wear his retired number 2 jersey. There, he was named as a Pac-10 Freshman of the Year in his first season, and as a member of the Pac-10 first team in both of his sophomore and junior seasons, with the highlight of his time coming in the form of an overtime buzzer beater to beat Arizona in the Pac-10 championship. It was after that season that he declared for the NBA draft, foregoing his senior season. Even though he led his team to a Pac-10 title, he would end up getting picked dead last with the 60th and final pick in that year's draft. But you see, all that the selection would do was fuel him. He brought the leadership and energy that he became known for at Washington to the Kings, becoming the first player selected with the final pick to win the Rookie Player of the Month honor. He was named a Western Conference Rookie of the Month not once, but twice that season. He worked his way into the starting lineup by the time his rookie season had come to an end, but he wasn't going to slow down there. 2 years later, he had a complete breakout season. In January of 2014, he would score an impressive 38 points against a stacked Thunder squad. He could shoot the ball well, pass the rock, and use his change of speed and direction to get to the 10 effortlessly. But if you thought that was impressive, he scored the same amount of points a week later against the Indiana Pacers. Off-balanced, in the face of defenders, it really didn't matter. Thomas was automatic. Although his 3 years alongside Boogie Cousins and eventually Rudy Gay made him a fan favorite in Sacramento, who would be moved to Phoenix in a sign-and-trade deal. But after just a brief stint with the Suns that didn't make much sense, Thomas would be dealt to the Boston Celtics, where he made himself an all-out legend. In his first full season with the team, he blossomed into a starting role after just 3 games coming off the bench. He would earn his first All-Star appearance, with the highlight of his regular season coming when he scored 38 for the third time in his career, this time against the Pistons. Although the Celtics would end up getting bounced in the first round, he would turn into a different animal come playoff time, changing gears and scoring 42 points en route to one of the Celtics' wins in the series. Heading into their next season, the Celtics needed a leader, and who else would step up other than their 5'9" captain, Isaiah Thomas. Starting the season with a bang, Thomas would score at least 20 points in his first 21 games, but he would not have been able to do it without his fearlessness, his crafty finishing, and his ability to turn it on like the flip of a switch. To no one's surprise, Thomas would be invited to play in his second straight All-Star game, but as the season went on, the Celtics were becoming more and more of a threat. By the end of the season, with Thomas at the helm, the Celtics found themselves with a top spot in the Eastern Conference, which of course meant that Thomas would be in the conversation for the Most Valuable Player award. Unfortunately, this would be the year that players like James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and of course the MVP Russell Westbrook were also having career years, so Thomas would end up 5th in voting, but that didn't stop him from doing his thing in the clutch, hence his nickname, the King of the Fourth Quarter. I mean, Isaiah Thomas's 2017 playoff run is worthy of a video on its own. His defining moment of heart and resilience in his career came in Game 2 of the second round of those playoffs against the Washington Wizards. Sadly, Thomas' sister had passed away just prior to the game, and although Thomas was distraught, he still played the game in her honor. And he played his heart out. With his teammates by his side, he was balling out of his mind. He had scored 24 points going into the fourth, and then the magic happened. In the clutch, no one could figure out how to stop this guy. First, he was able to push the game to overtime, and when it got there, the game was all but his. The Celtics outscored the Wizards in overtime by 10 points, and when it was all said and done, Thomas had put together a career night, scoring 53 points with 29 coming after the third quarter. He had lived up to his name and then some. He had then become a household name in Boston. He was able to get them back on top, but then something shocking happened. After the Celtics were knocked out of the playoffs without Thomas due to a right hip injury, the Celtics front office wanted change. And so they took a risk by sending their star to the Cavaliers in order to get Kyrie Irving. But there was more. Doctors found that there was more to Thomas's hip injury than they had originally thought. He was playing with severe problems, but even then, instead of getting surgery, Thomas opted to just do rehab on it. He missed the first 36 games of the season, but he was simply not the same when he returned. He had lost a lot of his explosiveness, which was incredibly important for a short guard like himself, and he was no longer the all-star version that had taken down teams just a year prior. After appearing in just 15 games with the Cavaliers, he would be moved again to the Lakers. On March 1st of that season, he would show that he had a little glimmer of what he used to be when he put up 29 points, but once again, just 1 year earlier, he was able to score that same amount purely in the fourth quarter. He was able to bounce back just a smidge with the Wizards in the 2019-2020 season, but after COVID hit, he struggled to even keep a roster spot, and would bounce around from team to team. And after not even getting signed on a team in the 2022-2023 season, he would sign just a 10-day contract with the Phoenix Suns and would appear in just 6 games. However, since then, he has been forced to watch the NBA as a free agent, rather than on a team. Thomas's game was defined by his prolific scoring ability. The king of the fourth quarter was unstoppable when he got hot in clutch time, and it truly was a special thing to watch that we might never see again. He was deadly from three-point range, and was a nightmare for opposing defenses because he could score on all 3 levels extraordinarily efficiently. But another attribute that made him so deadly was that he could bring all of the attention onto himself and dump the ball to his teammates to get a bucket of their own. His effort was undeniable. In a height-dominated sport, Thomas held his own. At his peak, he could go shot for shot with the best, and that is something that no one will ever take away from him. Apart from his NBA days, Thomas has done his best to stay active in the basketball scene. He has represented the Stars and Stripes on multiple FIBA occasions and has also spent some time playing in the Big 3 League, although he surely wishes that he were back in the NBA. As of now, he has not announced his retirement, so an opportunity may come knocking, but if not, his legacy will go down as a scorer who defied odds to lead a historic franchise in the NBA back to relevancy in one of the most inspiring seasons that basketball has ever seen. To round things out with this one, let's take a look at Earl Boykins, another guy who was able to fight his way onto roster spots for over a decade. Born in Cleveland, Boykins was able to lead his high school team to a 23-2 record by scoring 24.6 points per game by the time he was a senior. But, as it goes for these undersized guys, he was overlooked heading into college. Boykins would boast 2 D1 offers from Eastern Michigan and Iowa. Once Iowa pulled their offer, it was clear that Boykins would attend to Eastern Michigan. You see, the minute he stepped onto the court in college, he was an asset. He fought his way for the starting point guard position as just a freshman, and was at the helm for 4 seasons with his squad. He was able to lead his team to a MAC Conference Championship in both his sophomore and senior seasons, but as a senior, he was atop the leaderboards. years. He averaged around 26 points per game, which was the second most in the entire country, but even then, NBA teams struggled to find a place for him, so he went undrafted. But he had something special. Even though he stood at just 5'5", he could clearly hold his own. I mean, scoring 26 points per game at any level is hard enough, but at the college level, come on now. Even then, there was nothing to do other than fight for a spot in his first 2 seasons. He would bounce around playing for 4 teams. I mean, he was already a journeyman. He was able to make rosters, but not exactly stay on rosters. But after 2 seasons with the Clippers, he signed on to play for the Warriors, where he was able to establish himself in the role of a reliable backup point guard. Fans love to see the savvy 135-pound guard, yeah, that sounds crazy to say, slicing through his opponents, and after coming in 7th and 6th Man of the Year voting, he would be brought to the Denver Nuggets, and there he really made a name for himself. He was getting significant clock, and he was making the most of it. He was a surprisingly efficient scorer, and he proved that in his second year with the team, becoming the shortest player to ever drop 30 in a game, scoring 32 altogether. His scoring prowess was on full display, and he proved that he was another example of heart over height. His jumper needed to be on point to compensate with his lack of size, and as you can expect, it did just that. Just like players of the past with similar attributes like Bogues or Webb, his low center of gravity and exciting acceleration made it hard to stop the man. His role was clear, and he played it well. He was the guy to come off the bench and bring the energy that this team needed. As a matter of fact, he was so good at his role that he was consistently in the running for the 6th Man of the Year when he was with the Denver Nuggets, although never actually winning the award. After 3 full seasons with the teams, he would be traded away to go play in Milwaukee, where he brought the same energy, but with an even heavier role, starting in 19 out of 34 games with the team. While on the Bucks, Boykins would score a career-high 36 points in a January game, but even though his time in Milwaukee produced some good numbers, he would opt out of his contract and sign on with the Hornets midway through the season, but by then, his glory days had ended. After his stint with the Hornets, he would go overseas, but get a second chance in the NBA with the Wizards in the midst of the Gilbert Arenas drama. But by then, he was in his mid-30s, and he did not have the pep in his step that he once had, so he was just a shell of his former self. He'd stick around for 3 years after his overseas journey, but never get the amount of playing time that he once had, and would go on to retire soon after. His career did not have the highs as other short players had, but he still had a consistent spot for over a decade. He got what many players could only dream of because of his hard work, determination, and willingness and excellence to play his role. He was reliable, and that is all that teams needed. He could shoot the ball, he could pass it, and he could keep the game under control off the bench. He could find openings in defenses, attack them, and get to the lane or the foul stripe, where he shot nearly 90% over the course of his career. But his love for basketball is what kept him going, and it runs deep. Ever since leaving the NBA, he's been hungry for opportunities. In 2014, Boykins was given the chance to coach the Douglas County High School team in Colorado, but he was just getting started, because in 2021, he was given the opportunity to join the coaching staff at a D1 program in El Paso, the UTEP Miners. But apart from the game, he has spent time and effort to give back, becoming a motivational speaker and staying involved in charitable efforts, including the founding of the nonprofit Boykins Kids. Boykins was a guy who flew sort of under the radar for most of his career. He was not a Nate Robinson or a Spud Webb who stayed in the spotlight with their high-flying abilities. He was not a main guy on a top team like Isaiah Thomas, but he was a determined guard in a league filled with giants, sticking to his role, and boy did he excel at it.